Welcome everybody to the Global Lecture Hall. Today the lecture will be hosted by Professor Verena Hafner from the Humboldt University in Berlin. The topic of the day will be cognition from scratch, and we will have a couple of as usual, very interesting presentation. We had to change one of the speakers with respect to what you find on the website for personal reasons. Yang Ming couldn't give his lecture, but we have another very interesting lecture by Professor Dinghui Zhang, still from Shanghai Yao Tong, which will be maybe completely by chance, more related to the following one, which is by Arianna Menciassi on biohybrid. So, since the host of the day is Verena, I pass the floor to Verena. Thank you for coming, and let's look forward an interesting day.
Okay, thank you, Fabio, for the introduction. And I'm first trying to share my screen. Okay, so we're sending now here from Berlin, and actually we're lucky that we made it because we have this train conductor strike today, so all public transport doesn't work in Berlin, so it was a bit difficult to come here, but now we start. I'm from the Humboldt University Berlin, from the Department of Computer Science, and I'm heading the adaptive systems groups there. And here you see a small impression about Berlin, some of the most important sites here. So we not only have good science, but also lots of other things, lots of history, etc. And as Fabio already announced, the schedule for today is that we start with the two short presentations that we couldn't show last time. So one is the brain in the vat from Moscow, and the other one is the Chinese room experiment from Xi'an. And after that, I will start with the lecture on evolution, cognition from scratch. And later on, we also have two very interesting guest lectures. So, which one do we start with? Moscow, are you ready?
Verena, we actually have another program change because at the last minute they informed us that they cannot. I sent you an email a few minutes ago.
Okay.
They cannot give a presentation because the student is sick. So we only have the one from China.
The Chinese room. Okay, great. So if you want to know more about the brain in a vat, then you can also have a look at the long version of some of the recorded guest lectures, for example, the one by Olaf Sporns. Then we start with the second short presentation, 3-minute presentation on the Chinese room experiment, and that's from Northwestern Polytechnical in Xi'an in China. Are you ready to give your presentation?
Hello. I'm Dustin from Xi'an, NPU.
Hello.
We will have our presentation maybe 5 minutes later. We're not already our network, okay?
Okay, then maybe I start with the lecture, and we can do that before the first break in maybe half an hour.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, right. So the lecture today is from the main lecture is on the topic of evolution, cognition from scratch, and it tackles the issues about how can we create artificial intelligence systems, and for that we have to look at different time scales and different time perspectives. So as you see here on the slide, we basically have to look at three main different time perspectives. So on the top, it's the here and now perspective. So that's where we are now, where we currently are. These are, for example, dynamical systems or behavioral mechanisms, interaction of like the current time step of an agent interacting with its world. And in the middle, you see the ontogenetic or epigenetic perspective, which is an intermediate term perspective, and it concerns the lifetime of an individual. So it concerns all the learning and developmental mechanisms of an agent from birth to death, basically. And on the bottom level, we have the phylogenetic perspective, which is the topic of today mainly, which is evolution. And here is how intelligence has evolved over many generations. And for the artificial systems, we have to consider how the encoding in the genome is realized and how we can create evolutionary algorithms and morphogenesis. So here again, on top, we have the here and now perspective, so which is state-oriented. And if we only consider that one, we basically design it by hand. Then the ontogenetic perspective here, you need to set initial conditions for learning, learning of developmental processes, and that one is based on the phylogenetic perspective for the evolutionary algorithms and morphogenesis. So for understanding the whole agent and cognition from scratch, we have to consider all the three perspectives. And for the design, we have to look at what level, if we design artificial systems, at what level we put our design. So if we just look at the here and now perspective, we basically assume that all the rest, all the learning and the evolution has already happened, and we have to start from that basis. So let's start with the ontogenetic perspective, so development and learning. And one of the topics here are artificial neural networks. We don't have the time to go into more details, but there are many excellent books available which you can read about artificial neural networks and other learning techniques. Then the second main part, which we want to consider in the embodied AI lecture, is developmental robotics, which is also on this middle time perspective. And here I would like to show you some examples on body maps, how you can create a presentation of your body, sensory motor exploration and learning. And while the next few slides are basically heavily focused on our own research, and because we're doing a lot of research in developmental robotics, and I'm going to show you some examples here on how to create developmental robotics that is inspired by the development of humans, of young children as well. So let's start with the body maps. We're interested in studying how an agent can develop a map, a representation of its own body. We have a distinction between its own body and the other world. And here we are inspired by somatosensory maps in the human cortex. You see on the right here a sketch. And we want to have these maps being a dynamic and short-term representation of both the body and also the behavior. So they should also dynamically be able to change. And one of the methods that you can use for doing that is using maps based on information distances. So here we're considering an artificial agent, so a robot. In this experiment, we had these small Sony Aibo robots that look like little dogs. And we had the dogs interact with their environment, the dog robots, and the maps were automatically created by having informationally close sensors also close on the map, on this body map. And this map then basically functions as a body scheme that represents both the body and the behavior of the agent. And you can see in the drawing that the sensors of the head arrange in a certain way, and the sensors of the shoulders and hips are drawing close together. So that's one option of developing a body representation in developmental robotics. Another topic is sensory motor exploration and how you can interact with the world and have different exploration strategies. So here we did experiments with this humanoid robot now, which had, for simplicity, had a small marker attached to its hand and doing some kind of exploration with its arms. So basically what the robot did, the robot learned a mapping between what it saw and the motor action it performed. So that was the learning part here. And you can compare it very well with the motor actions that young babies do when they're just a few weeks or months old. They just do this seemingly random movements with their arms and legs, and thereby learning about their own sensory motor capabilities. And there are different ways how you can approach these exploration strategies. So the most simple one is just using random motor babbling, so just randomly putting some motor commands on the arms of the robot. And there are also more interesting strategies. One of them is a goal-directed strategy where the robot sets its own goals that it wants to reach. For example, also with arm movements. For that, Matthias Rolf and Professor Azada did a very nice, just recently, very nice study on that. And a third possibility of how to do these exploration strategies for learning and development is using something like intrinsic motivation. And so here, the robot tries to set its own actions depending on the learning progress. So this can be shown in the playground experiment, which we did Pierre-Yves Oudelier and Frédéric Kaplan several years ago. So that experiment on intrinsic motivation had an agent, so again this Aibo robot, that could perform different actions in this children playground and always chose the action that would probably maximize its own learning progress, and by that exploring the whole sensory motor action space. And on the now it looks like that. So you have here sensory motor exploration spaces with the right and the left arm. And also an interesting study we did, which is related to developmental robotics, is the question whether pointing behavior could emerge from this simple grasping and reaching behavior. And so young babies, they point at things, and at the beginning they point at things even when no adult is in the vicinity and is looking at him or her. So the question is, how can this pointing behavior emerge? And we created a robotic experiment here where the robot explored its sensory motor capabilities with its own hand, and then we put an object there, and the robot then would grasp the object, and we were interested what happens if the object is outside the field of grasp of the robot. And maybe here we can show a short video of that, Nathan. So that's the robot exploring. And now we see it's trying to reach the object and is automatically pointing towards the object just by using a simple exploration and learning algorithm. Then the last example I want to mention is something we extended that to tool use and how these humanoid robots can use tools by choosing their actions. So again, the robot learned about its own sensory motor space by doing this exploration behavior, and then internally simulating the action because it has the robot has the experience. It could mentally perform the action both with a tool or without a tool. And then by looking at the prediction error, the robot could then choose whether to use the tool for a particular action or to not choose the tool. And this is still all research in continuation. And if you're interested in more details, just have a look at our webpage and some of our papers. So now let's go back to the time perspectives. Here, we were looking now, in the last slides, we were looking on the ontogenetic development, so learning and development during the lifetime of an agent. And now we're going to look at the lower level, at the phylogenetic development, phylogenetic perspective, where we look at artificial evolution and how intelligence can develop over several generations. So we start with evolution, and they were basically different artificial evolution strategies that were independently developed. One by John Holland, which is genetic algorithms, or also called GAs. Another one by Ingo Rechenberg, evolution strategies. And later on, also some third alternative has been invented by John Kosa, genetic programming. And so these were in the late 1960s, 1970s, where John Holland and Ingo Rechenberg independently developed their artificial evolution strategies. And so now, of course, because Ingo Rechenberg is a professor in Berlin, so we're focusing on him. So he's also one of the fathers of the whole field of bionics and biomimetics. And he discovered that by taking inspiration from natural systems that have evolved over many millions of years, we can also apply that to artificial systems. And you can see here in the examples, you can see, for example, you can see the wings of a bird, which have been transformed to the wings of an aeroplane and evolved in a particular shape to improve the aerodynamics. And another interesting statement is the fuel pipe problem. So imagine you have a fuel pipe that is, so the fuel is coming from the bottom here and is supposed to go through this pipe to the right. And the question is, how do we design this curvature, the curvature of this pipe? So does anybody have any suggestions how we can do that?
Yeah, yes, I have. Okay, it's a quarter circle.
It's a quarter circle. Yes, that would be one possibility. So a quarter circle would be easy to construct, and most of the engineers also came up with that idea. And then, but then Rechenberg said, well, maybe it's not the optimal solution. And he designed some artificial evolution of the shape of this, well, which was actually first a quarter pipe in most applications. And then he put these tires on there, and he tried to evolve, he tried to try out different configurations using artificial evolution and selection based on the fitness, so based on the throughput of the pipe. And actually, what turned out is that not a quarter circle is the best solution, but some kind of hook-shaped curve, as you can see here in the drawing. And this optimal form has been found by evolution, by artificial evolution, and is now applied in many of these systems. And some other example we see here is antennas for satellites that have also been, their shape has been evolved by artificial evolution, and actually NASA is now using some of the designs that have been evolved in that way. Then we have another question here. So how is that connected to creativity? Can artificial evolution be creative, really? And can artificial evolution be as creative as humans are? So I have another quest, and someone who has a good answer, please let me know. So you have to connect these four corners of a square with three straight lines ending up in the starting corner. So you start in one corner, let's say the bottom left, and you have to connect them with three straight lines and end up in the starting corner. Is that possible? Anybody? Any ideas?
You go outside with
Okay, we have some answer here from Berlin. So basically, we go outside. I think I can't draw in here. It doesn't matter. So we don't just connect these crosses, but we go outside of the field of view. So we cross the X, and then we go like that, and then we go back. So basically, we have a triangle now. We have a triangle that goes through all the four lines. And so we as humans can come up with these ideas, well, sometimes if we are in a creative mood. And the question is whether machines can too. And this, of course, it pretty much depends on the preconditions. And we now have a look whether we can do that with artificial evolution by cumulative selection. So we select always the fittest individuals in one generation, and they are allowed to reproduce. And therefore, that's how evolution works. And so Richard Dawkins, who is the author of The Selfish and many other interesting books, proposed that, and we have an example here why artificial evolution works, and why, of course, it is much better than just completely random exploration. And that's the example of a monkey trying to type Shakespeare. So that's an example of Richard Dawkins. And so here you see some text that is taken from Shakespeare, from Hamlet. You can see very old language. Do you see yonder cloud that's almost in shape of a camel by the mast, and so on? And then Hamlet says, "Methinks it is like a weasel." And so we don't assume that the monkey has to type the whole Hamlet, but just this one sentence, "Methinks it is like a weasel." So how many different, if the monkey is just randomly typing letters on a typewriter, how many different alternatives does the monkey have to type this sentence?
Мне кажется, бесконечно много тут вариантов.
Бесконечно?
Или тут какой-то подвох в вопросе?
Это червяк.
Да, мне кажется...
Я передачу слышала, и там говорилось, что вероятность попадания минимальная, микроскопическая.
So for Russia? No? Nobody? So so you have I think it's 28 letters, and for each letter we have 26 options. So it's 26 to the power of 28. So that's a huge number, and the monkey would never in his lifetime finish by typing random numbers or letters, finish the sentence. But if we apply this cumulative selection, if we just select the best ones and we assume that the monkey is typing a sentence, and then we measure the quality of the sentence by just some simple measure. For example, here we take the distance to the target, so the distance for each letter to the target sentence. We can actually realize the correct sentence in just 43 generations. And that is a computer program that can run in some seconds on any computer and doesn't take thousands of years as the monkey would type by randomly typing. So that's one argument that Richard Dawkins put to explain how evolution works, and here we can see how to put that into artificial programs. So normally there's a selective pressure by the environment or by using a certain fitness function. But what you can also do with artificial evolution is to use aesthetic selection. And a nice example is the biomorphs, which you can see on the left, these nice creatures. And these creatures, they have been evolved by aesthetic selection, so by encoding the creature in a genome, which is just a string of numbers, and then the expression of these genes is the graphical appearance that you can see on the slide. And then a human person is selecting these individuals based on their fitness, based on the aesthetic appeal, whether she likes it or how much she likes it, and then a new generation is reproduced using some mutation on these genes, which results in new creatures. And this works out very well, and they have been produced in computer programs, but also repainted by the surrealist painter Desmond Morris. And you can see here that these are wonderful creative things that just came out of this kind of evolution method. Now let's have a look at the basic cycle for artificial evolution, which is taken from Rolf's book. And well, actually most of the slides on evolution are from Rolf, so thank you very much for that. So the basic cycle here starts with a genotype on top. So you have the genotype, which is a string, could be DNA, could consist of the 4 letters we have in the DNA. It could be binary, it could be real valued. So basically you are free to choose the encoding. And then this genotype interacts with its environment and produces a phenotype. So the phenotype in our example is this artificial creature here. So that is also created through the development of the agent. And these phenotypes, so these agents, they also interact with their environment. and they compete in the environments for those who can survive and for those who can reproduce, for those who have the best fitness. And so you choose the best ones by some selection strategies here. There are also a range of different selection strategies that can be used in artificial evolution. And when you have done the selection, then you can apply mutation and crossover to create a new population, and the whole thing starts again. And yeah, mutation is just by changing randomly some of the genes or by alternating them. And crossover is usually similar to sexual reproduction, where you have two parents and you choose parts of the genotype from both parents and combine them to form a new individual. So now I want to show some practical example of a small robot that is has 2 wheels and 3 sensors. Let's just assume they're distance sensors. And we will see more of these robots when we have the session on Breitenberg vehicles. So basically, we want to evolve a neural controller that makes this robot move or behave in a certain way. So, so what do we need? What do we need to specify here? How can we encode our genome? Any suggestions?
Motoryczny, sensoryczny, jak możemy zrobić z tego kodu tych gen? Co musimy wstawić do tego kodu?
Any suggestions how we can design this controller for this robot?
Tak, żeby był dalej inteligentny.
Maybe here?
Sensors and motors, so the position of the sensors or motors.
The positions, what do we have to do with the sensors and the motors?
Connect.
Exactly, connect. We have to connect the sensors with the motors. So if we have 3 sensors and 2 motors, we have 6 connections. And basically, we have to evolve the weights of these connections. So how strong are the weights? Are they positive or are they negative? And so you can see here 6 different weights, and we can have real valued numbers, and we can transform them into binary code to create our initial genome. So that's the first part. That's how we do the encoding. Then we have to do some selection. So how can we select the best robots? We have to choose some kind of fitness function for selection. What could be a fitness function for this robot? What would be good for this robot? If we want, for example, if we want to create a fast robot, we could look at the speed.
We have an answer from Plymouth.
Yes.
Well, we could check precision of the robot. So, given a goal, how precisely does it reach the position, for example?
Exactly. So, thanks, Ivana. What else? For example, we could take a certain time span and then look at the starting position and then look at the end position and just measure the distance, right? Okay. So we could do that, and so we have a selection method for our really fast and really clever robot here. And the next thing is we have to decide on the reproduction, so we can choose whether to use crossover and mutation. So it's not always necessary to do crossover, but we can. So we can take the genome, choose a crossover point, and take the left side of one genome and the right side of the other genome and combine them to create two new individuals and the resulting genes here. And for mutation, the question is how to choose the mutation rate. We could choose them, yes, random would be one answer. If we choose the mutation rate, if the mutation rate is too small, then nothing changes, right? What if the mutation rate is too big? Exactly, then you can't fix the solution, then it's basically just random search. You're basically doing random search and you're just randomly exploring the space. Okay, so we have all the parameters for our artificial evolution, and in that way we can create a little robot that evolves to for example, run very fast. So we are now able to do that, and now we want to go a bit more into the embodied AI approach. So far, the approaches to evolutionary robotics, we have a given robot, and we evolve the control. So we evolve the neural network inside the robot, what we just did in this small exercise. And if you want to focus on a more embodied approach, which we want, obviously, we could not only evolve the controller of the robot, but we could co-evolve the morphology and the control of the robot. So the shape, basically the shape and the behavior of the robot, we can evolve at the same time. And there have been some early already very interesting approaches to that on evolving morphology and control. And these were artificial creatures invented by Carl Sims. And here we have, let's see, maybe we first show the movie. Nathan, could you please show the movie of the Sims creatures?
Disputes that resulted in simulated evolutions. It shows the results after a number of generations. Here's some that are evolved for swimming ability. Here's a number of different strategies that came up. Here's one that swims with a flagellum-like tail. Here's another one that is kind of kicking itself along. Some of them look like real-world creatures a little bit, but others look completely different from things that you see naturally. Here's a water snake-like creature which actually does helix motions a little bit. And then here's another water snake type of strategy, and three of them in the same simulation. So now these are given land physics, friction and gravity, and selected for their ability to walk. And some very simple strategies came up which could still propel the creatures across the ground. Some with counterweights that just swung, and others with two leg-like appendages that can flip over each other. Here's one that has kind of like a rowing strategy, and he can go quite quickly along the ground. This is a relative of that creature that has a slight variation in his gait. Every stroke he does a somersault and then continues along. There was no selection against dizziness for these creatures. So that was a perfectly good solution.
So none of this has been designed by hand. Everything is evolved,
like
both the control and also the shape of these creatures.
A number of things came up that were a little bit like inchworms. This one was actually the water snake that I put on land and then let evolve further to see if he could sidewind or whatever. And sure enough, after a number of generations, he figured out how to crawl. And he can even crawl in two directions. There he tipped over a little bit and then started pushing from the other side, which is, it seems fairly complicated how he would know to do that, but sure enough. And here's one that kind of bounds along with two leg-like appendages, and this is one of the faster creatures on land. Here's another group of creatures which were selected for jumping. So the higher they could get off the ground, the better they were rated and the more that they survive and reproduce. So the final challenge for these creatures was actually to compete against each other. Natural evolution doesn't have anybody saying what fitness is. There's no definition of who gets to survive and reproduce.
Like you say to these simple creatures, that swimming is good.
Right. So that's, in a sense, that's optimization. You know what the goal is, and you're trying to optimize towards that particular goal. And I gave them these goals. The goal was the only thing that I gave them. They figured out the solution, but I still gave them the goal. Now, natural evolution doesn't even have that goal. The fitness depends on a lot of other things that are evolving, other creatures in the environment that are evolving, changing conditions in the environment, all affect what fitness really is. And so there is no such thing as a goal or a definition of fitness. And so to simulate natural evolution a little bit closer, I thought that a competition situation would accomplish that. So the world has a desirable cube in the middle, a common resource. Perhaps it represents food. And one creature starts on one side of the cube, another creature starts on the other side, and then they are let go to perform their various behaviors, whatever they might be. And the one that is closest to the cube at the end of a certain amount of time is the winner.
It gets the food.
Right. And that means that it gets to reproduce and make more offspring that are copies but with mutations of itself. Here's these creatures which figured out how to roll towards the cube. And at first they both just would get to the cube and touch it, so this was a tie score. A few more generations later, though, a strategy came up which would not just get to the cube, but shove the opponent away. And so that was winning for quite a while. More generations go by, and this one evolved to deal better with this offending arm, and it learned how to climb up and over it to still get to the cube. Here's one that, an arm-like strategy that knocks the cube to the side and then pins down his opponent. But that arm doesn't do very well against some of the other ones that cover up the cube quickly.
Okay, I think we saw now how artificial evolution can basically evolve both the controller and the shape of the robot. And the question is, how can we parameterize this? So we have the encoding in the genome, which creates the embodied agent from the genotype to the phenotype. And this is normally, well, in animals and humans, this is done through development and growth. So the infants grow during their development. And for these artificial agents, we could create a similar method, which is done by recursive encoding. So basically, we don't encode the fully grown body, but we encode the rules for the growth. So here, as you see on the slide, we have one segment with some indicators for recursion. And so you start with the body, and then the body grows these different legs and other limbs. And I'd like to show another study on artificial evolution, some work by Josh Bongard and also by Hod Lipson and John Pollack, which is where the representation of the morphology is in the genome. So the robots consist of bars, actuators, and neurons. The bars are defined by having a certain length, a certain diameter, their stiffness, and their joint type. The actuators can have a different actuator type, a different range, and you can also define the specific neurons. How big are their thresholds? What are the synaptic strength and other variables you can use for neurons? And then you do the incursive encoding. And in their study, the interesting thing is that they not just did the work in pure simulation with the physics engine, but also printed this with a 3D printer onto a real robot, could continue to evolve. And so the growth was done in simulation, but the end result was printed, and the behavior of this agent was observed. And here we have another work by Josh Bongard, which is based on genetic regulatory networks. And what Josh did, he evolved block pushers, so artificial agents that are based on many of these different segments, just sphere-shaped segments, which each had both motors and neurons inside. And they were grown based on certain rules, which are based on these networks. And I don't have time to go into detail onto that, but we can see a short movie now which tests the phenotypes in a physically realistic simulation. So here you can see how the growth phase works. So we start with one single element, and the element then adds different segments until it is a fully developed agent with different behaviors. Okay, let's have a look at the video of evolution of block pushers, please.
Artificial ontogeny is a system for automatically evolving virtual robots or agents in a three-dimensional physics-based simulation for various user-defined tasks. In our first set of experiments, we evolved agents to push a large block in their environment as far as possible during a fixed time period. Here we see an agent growing from a single starting sphere into a set of connected spheres. These spheres are loosely modeled on biological cells, but also serve as the basic mechanical unit from which the agent is constructed. Each unit contains a complete copy of the genetic information shaping the growth of the agent, as well as sensors, motors, and neural structure. As these units grow and divide, so too does the neural structure grow inside the developing body. The agent shown here was extracted from one evolutionary run after 2 hours. At this point, artificial ontogeny has discovered how to grow the brain and body of the agent together to achieve an inchworm method of locomotion. This agent is a descendant of the previous one and appeared in the evolving population after a further 2 hours had elapsed. Here, evolution has discovered that increased mass allows the agent to exert more force against the block. Also, the inchworm method of locomotion has been modified to create a long appendage that pushes against the block. White units contain both sensors and motors. Light gray units contain only sensors. The dark gray units contain only motors, and the black units are empty and only provide structural support. The combination of different types of units within a single agent indicates that cell differentiation has occurred. A genetic algorithm based on genetic regulatory networks was designed to first grow and then evaluate each agent from among a population of potential solutions. This agent was taken from a separate evolutionary run. In this run, artificial ontogeny discovers that pushing against the block with 2 points of contact instead of 1 is a much better strategy. The appendages support one another by lying across each other. These 3 agents, taken together, demonstrate that genetic regulatory networks can be used to design all aspects of an autonomous agent, including the body shape and size, the material from which the agent is constructed, the numbers and distribution of sensors and motors, and the construction of neural structure, which is distributed across the agent's body. The genetic regulatory networks are necessary because they allow evolution to grow, but also to modify different parts of the agent's body at the same time. Thus, changes to one component do not disrupt the other components.
Okay, thanks. So you saw that artificial evolution here is very, very powerful, and you can create agents that show all sort of things, and sometimes even things that an engineer or a designer would not have been able to invent it or put into such a system. And often it's very difficult to understand such an evolved creature, because the structure is not very systematic, but it's just what evolution came up with, and so it's quite difficult to understand what's behind that. And while the same applies to our own brains and bodies. So here you can just quickly see again how this inchworm method of locomotion works like. So for each of these segments here you have a motor and a sensor, and some of these sensors and motors are connected, and that's also defined in the stereotype. So coming back to these timescales, so we had a look at the ontogenetic timescale, time perspective. We had a look at the phylogenetic time perspective on evolution, and we see how all we saw how all this works together. But in fact, in reality, these timescales they're very tightly intertwined. So all the top perspective are based on the lower ones, but there are also interaction through the environment and through the external pressures that has them interact a bit. And if you're interested to find out more, maybe you can have a look at something that is called the Baldwin effect, how learning and evolution is more tightly related than we might think. And of course, there's lots of literature on artificial evolution, and you can have a look at. And there's also lots of software you can use. I think Josh Bongard has on his website, he has some ready-to-use software where you can try to play with these creatures, which we just saw in the blog pushers video. So, assignments for next week. Read the chapter 6 of How the Body, and we also have some assignments where we need volunteers, but I think Fabio will send an email around to look for additional volunteers. So thank you very much for your attention, and stay tuned for the guest lectures. Are there any questions? Yes, we can do that, and then have to break. Then have to break after the student presentation.
Verena, you are the leader.
Do you have any questions, any comments on the topics of today?
Maybe I can ask a question.
Yes, Ralph?
Verena, so you presented different methods of incorporating embodiment into an evolutionary algorithm by co-evolving neural structure and physical structure of the robot. And you presented several methods, and one was more like the Carl Sims, where you encode sort of, or the Golem project, where you encode aspects of or constraints on the final structure of the robots into the genome. And on the other hand, you have the genetic regulatory networks. So what are some of the trade-offs or advantages of using one or the other of these methods?
Right. So I think, well, the first method is obviously the easier one, where you directly evolve the structure, but that's not really how it works in nature. So in nature we have growth. We can therefore create much more complex systems by having, for example, genetic regulatory networks. And also what we can do is include the learning and developmental process into this evolution. And basically have agents evolve that then grow, that then learn, that then develop, and then some agents which have a good basic structure which allows them to have a general learning ability, they are selected. So of course it's the better approach is to keep very flexible and also include the growth. But of course it's quite difficult to realize that in artificial systems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Plymouth.
Yes.
Thank you, that was very interesting. You presented kind of evolutionary techniques along 3 different scales. How much work is there in trying to integrate or combine evolution across all 3 scales simultaneously?
There is some work, but mainly people who work in evolution, they work in evolution, and people who work in development. So I think it would be good if these different fields would cooperate a bit more, because if you just look at it separately, you're probably missing out some of the most important things.
Maybe I can add something to the question. There is some early work that was done quite a while ago by Dario Floreano, where he used artificial evolution, and then it turned out that actually artificial evolution came up with something that looks like Hebbian learning, so sort of wired together. So basically, evolution came up with a learning mechanism that then can, of course, be used in the developmental process.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then no, we don't start with the guest lecture. Then we have the short presentation now from Moscow. Oh no, not from Moscow, from China, from Xi'an, about the Chinese room.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? From Xi'an?
Yes, we can.
Can hear you.
Yes, yes.
Okay. My student Alice will give a presentation on brain in a vat. Okay? Please
okay.
share the screen. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Alice from NPU China. I'd like to introduce the brain in vat thought experiment for you. First, it is Hilary Putnam that put forward this thought experiment in his book, Reason, Truth, and History. It is a book related to philosophy, so it is a topic about philosophy. So the story is like this. A mad scientist removes a person's brain from the body and suspend it in a vat of life-sustaining liquid, and he connects the neurons by wires to a supercomputer which can provide the brain with electrical impulses identical to those the brain normally receives. That is to say, as the picture shows, the brain is in a vat, but it was thought she's a person and she's boating in the lake. So there is a question for this thought experiment. Are you sure you are not bringing a vat? That means if you cannot rule out the possibility of the hypothesis, then does it mean we all are brains in a vat? It sounds so unbelievable. But don't be worried. It has already been proved to be false. So if you are interested in how to prove it, you can search on the internet and find the answer. Now, so though it is a topic about philosophy, it can also bring us some ideas. So we have already started have some achievement in the study about our brains and neurons. So imagine if someday we get further understanding about the brains and neurons, maybe we can design and produce. Maybe we can design such an intelligent simulated brain. It sounds very wonderful if the robots can think and have feelings. So maybe this is not just a hypothesis, and it is also a picture for the future AI. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
So now I think there would be a lot to discuss, but we don't have any time for question now. So I suggest we're a bit behind the schedule, but we still make about 10-minute coffee break now. And then we start with two very exciting guest lectures. One is by Dingo Zhang, professor at Shanghai University in China on electromyography applications in human-machine systems. And the other guest speaker is Arianna Menchiasi from Pisa in Italy, and she's going to talk about advanced materials and systems for biohybrid actuators and sensors. So let's meet again in 10 minutes at 10:15. Well, here it is 10:15. For you, it's 10:15 something. So let's meet then again. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, I think we can close now the lecture of today. And next week's lecture is on soft robotics and bioinspiration, so it probably nicely continues the guest lecture which we just heard about. And so I'm saying bye-bye from Berlin. And maybe Fabio, you want to say something about...
I want to say bye-bye and sorry for this very long lecture, in particular for Asian people. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.